Hello. Here we are, excited about our guest. We have been reading her book this season, and it's just been really eye-opening and deep and well written, and I can't say enough good things about it. You Should Be Grateful, Stories of Race, Identity, and Transracial Adoption. We're here with Angela Tucker. Angela, thank you for being here, for doing
Yay.
this, for this
Hello.
book, for your
Yeah,
words, your
yeah.
advocacy, everything. Just
Everything. Thank you. Thank you for having me and thank you for reading it.
uh,
Thank you. And we're just like we're like fangirls. We're like, here you are. We're seeing you. We're 4 years into this, but sometimes it's still like, oh my gosh, we're here with Angela. Because you've been around like doing this for a long time.
It feels like it. Yeah, my documentary came out in 2013,
Yeah.
so it's more than a decade of
Yeah,
doing
it's
this work.
early. Yeah. And you run the Adoptee Mentoring Society. So tell us a little bit about that for our listeners who may not know.
Yeah, the Adoptee Mentoring Society I founded in 2021, and it's um, virtual mentorship for adoptees all over the world, essentially, ages 12 and up, both one-on-one and group mentorship, because it's just a healing thing to be with other adoptees who understand and you don't have to extra explain or defend. So I was really after the documentary realizing that need when so many people, adopted people, would come up to me after the screenings and just say, like, I've never talked to another adoptee before who just got it. This is incredible. And that alone was had a different meaning than working with a therapist, for example. Because for many adoptees, there wasn't something to diagnose, there wasn't something to treat.
Mhm.
They didn't want that, just wanted to be known, to be seen, to be able to speak openly, freely about the unique experience. And so, yeah, I built this adoptee mentoring society, and I'm just having a really fun time, both being the executive director and continuing to mentor and then building out a team. So kind of doing like business side, which is a little more new, and then the passion and the joy of the adoptee identities and helping people in that way.
how many members do you have and mentors and we'll get information and put it all in the show notes for people to reach out to
Mhm.
be part of it because
Yeah,
did.
adopteementorship.org is where we're at, and I'm working on the annual report right now. I'm going to send that out pretty soon. I think our numbers are like maybe 350 or
Oh,
400
Wow.
adoptees who we've mentored this year or last year, 2024.
that's a lot. I didn't know it was that big.
I didn't either. How does
Yeah.
your outreach work?
I mean, it's just this stuff. A lot of people have read my book, and so then they find their way. I talk about mentorship in my book. Um, I was mentoring over 300 people before I formed the nonprofit. So after the movie came out, this is how it all started, is I started offering virtual sessions for folks, and then one of my advisors is like, I think you can scale this up and maybe train others to mentor. And so
Yeah.
I'm like,
Mm.
yeah, I think this is not sustainable. So yeah, there's not I don't have a marketing plan at this point, and that's partly because I'm working hard to train our other mentors because it is a pretty unique role,
Hmm.
inevitably triggering for the mentors who are adoptees themselves. And it's been pretty interesting because a lot of mentorship programs, the format is kind of based on age. And we r really can't do that. So I base it on the adoptee consciousness model touchstones. So ensuring that mentors are in this expansiveness touchstone, meaning they can hold like a both and around adoption. Like I hate being adopted and I love my adoptive parents or whatever the nuance might be. Mentors need to be in that stage.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because the first round I did think about just age for mentors, but I found because of the generational differences in adoption and how it's been practiced over the years that a 50-year-old adoptee was very triggered by like a 14-year-old adoptee because the 14-year-old would say like, "Oh, my birth mom's coming to my baseball game this week and I don't want her to be there. I just saw her," or something.
Oh.
And the 50-year-old would be like, "I'm so jealous. I would have never had that opportunity." And so it's like, "Oh, okay, yeah, this has to be done differently."
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
interesting. I
that
didn't think
does make
about
sense.
any of it. Yeah.
That does make sense.
Mm-hmm. It really does. And with having this, you were just saying the and or conversation. We got a lot of that from your book too.
The
And
both
speaking
and
of your book,
yes.
yeah, the both and even we both have here our adoptee manifesto, right?
Yay.
Which is so big. I actually think this is like a, I don't know what you call it, but like the stamp for adoptees. Like you can, we say this in our Patreon group, you can be at any stage and feel any way you want. It's your story. It doesn't negate you or make you anything. You can have and or. Will you talk about that a little?
Yeah, I mean, just that understanding that we can hold so many different truths at the same time, and we need to in order to kind of have some settling in our bodies, I think. So like the first sentence of the manifesto is we can love both all of our parents, our adoptive parents, our foster parents, our birth parents, and for others, there's even more, and that's not mutually exclusive. For many people, that's many non-adoptees, it's pretty hard to understand.
Mm-hmm.
And then also for me, just critiquing adoption, for many people, they assume that means I hate my adoptive parents. And so trying to help people understand that's not it either. Yeah, that's really been like the message for me of the last decade.
Mm-hmm. Why are you speaking out and you must be angry or had a horrible
Yeah.
adoption, which
Hmm.
the point
Yeah, I
is
mean that's
adoptees have issues with being
yeah,
adopted.
the title of the book. You should be grateful instead of
Right.
offering any critiques on what happened to you in your life. And
What I find so, well, I don't know why I would find this astounding because it wasn't until 4 years ago when Louise and I started the podcast when I picked up my first ever book about it and started talking, and coming out of the fog,
and what book
using
was that?
um The Primal Wound, which I know is
Uh-huh.
kind of a controversial book, but it's kind of the gateway into
How
it,
we
right? You know what
started.
I mean? Like I'd never heard of any other book. For some reason, I had heard of The Primal Wound, and so we started the podcast and said, let's do these books. And then, here we are 4 years later. But up until that point, I bought into the narrative that's out in the
Right?
mainstream that this is a wonderful thing, that you were lucky, grateful, all that stuff. So I'm going to amend how I started saying this, which was it's astounding that people still have that narrative, but why wouldn't it be
Right.
anything but that? People don't know.
No, and Georgia Tan had an
Mm.
amazing
Oh,
marketing scheme for making it
Hmm.
oh,
be a good thing. Take homeless women's
mm,
babies, put them in Hollywood with
Hmm.
celebrity parents, and that message has really stuck. And
It
that's
yeah.
where,
sure
like in my
has.
book, I think it's so important to bring out youth voices. In my book, I try to do
Hmm.
that because of those early conversations I would have with young teens who were trying to figure out the difference between adoption and kidnapping. And I loved it because I'm like, yeah, this is when you get to a certain age, you know you can't ever conflate those two. But from the kid's perspective, it is like, well, what is the difference?
Yeah. Well, in trafficking, I mean, I was having a conversation with a friend recently and she said, it's like trafficking. I said, well, it is trafficking when you exchange money for a person and just the
Right.
light bulbs. I think that's what Sarah was saying, the education. Why wouldn't people know this, right? They wouldn't know this. And we didn't know it, and
Well,
and
there's
we
a
were in
big
it.
vested interest in keeping this the way it is because there's a lot of money involved in this whole industry. going back to like adoptees and, it is a spectrum, right? There
Yeah.
are, you can, the and, um, scenario, it's kind of like the pendulum swinging and coming to that place. But sometimes, people are way up here with their radical and then way over here with everything's so
Rainbows.
wonderful. And then I think eventually maybe
Settle
settling
kind of in
somewhere in the, yeah.
equilibrium, find that balance a little bit. Yeah. Less rocked by happenings in their life or people making statements or watching a show. Yeah, I think you're right.
I'm
I think,
curious. I think I asked this of other people because there's a theory out there, and I don't know who started it about adoptees can attach but not bond. Do
mm,
you believe that with their adoptive parents, right? You can attach, but really the only bond is with the first mother. I'm just curious what you feel about that.
Yeah, interesting. I have not heard that before. Um, I I don't know if I believe that. I would want to learn more. I can't deny that that biology matters,
mm,
you know? And so
mhm,
I want to lean into understanding that, and I do think there is a difference. Consistently asking my parents about their one biological daughter, like, I know you love us all, but like, I know that. And do you love your biological daughter differently than us? Like, is there something? And I, it's too hard for people to answer that question honestly,
Yeah.
is what I believe.
yeah.
So perhaps that's true. I think that it is different just being raised by someone that you have zero connection to
Mhm.
that yeah,
It's super random.
it's a
We did
random
have
person.
a guest
Yeah, we
ask
did.
her mother, her adoptive mother, when she was dying about that very question, and the mother admitted.
Yeah, we
Mhm.
had that. I was thinking
Hmm.
that when you said it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well,
And
it's
she
in, it's
finally
in,
admitted
you
that
did.
it was true.
It's really
Um,
refreshing to have someone admit what we really know is true,
hmm.
while again, we're not saying we don't think you love us,
Right.
but
I
it
think that's
is
it.
different.
I think all three of us have siblings that are biological to our parents too. And so
Mm,
you
Hmm.
can kind of
you can see it.
you can see it, and it doesn't mean they didn't love you. And it doesn't
Right.
mean they didn't try
Right.
and have a bond of some sort and all these things. But you can kind of go, well, I don't know. I noticed it. I mean, my parents are deceased, so we can't talk about it anymore. But I did notice it with my mom and my brother. She would never admit that. I know she wouldn't, even on her deathbed. I was with her on her deathbed, and there was not that, but different. I think different if they can just say, it's different. It is different
It's
because
different.
we've all met
Yeah.
biology now too. And then you're like, okay, I used to kind of defend the nature versus nurture on the other side. And now I'm like, nature's big. It's
Oh,
just big.
undeniably. And to read a book
Hmm.
like Braiding Sweetgrass or something that's all about nature and connections, underground root systems, ecosystems, it's like nature is powerful, interesting,
Mhm.
connected. Yeah, I am always grateful when my mom corrects people who would say like, Angela, you got a better life. She would say, Angela got a different life.
Mhm.
And I think about that in parallel to what you said, where yes, our adoptive parents hopefully love us and love us differently than their
Mhm.
biological. Like that's just, it feels really soothing for me whenever I would hear my mom correct people and say, it's not a better life, it's a different life.
Right.
It just felt so honest and true, and just grateful for that.
Yeah. And so many
You had
adoptees
great, I
don't.
mean,
Yeah.
reading your book,
Yeah.
just, I love your relationship with your parents and the
Same.
openness and the honesty. And that was really a fortunate way
Yeah.
to grow up. And then that gave, I mean, you
Yeah.
have the tools, both a combination, I guess, of nature and nurture to then help other people. It's really,
It's great. I mean, I do credit this to having some of the successes I've had as an adoptee out there in the world, because I think there's other adoptees who are doing similar work but aren't heard the way that I am because there's so much safety that mainly adoptive parents, but general society feels in just knowing that I have a good relationship with my adoptive parents versus adoptees doing very similar work, but
Mhm.
people either don't know the status of the relationship with their adoptive parents or they do know and it's estrangement or something and they are like less qualified.
Yeah.
It's
I was
really
gonna say that when
frustrating.
I was gonna say that when you were talking about adoptees, because many adoptees don't have loving parents, right? They
Yeah,
don't. I
yeah,
really, who I went home with rocked. It could have been a different day, a different family. And I think that does negate them because then they're seen as the angry adoptee,
I
that
right?
think in our
makes
podcast, I'm seeing that way,
There's
Louise.
more the angry, but there's more extreme, like even, and I think that does, it negates that. And that's not right either because, you know, I had someone ask me recently, why are you, it was somebody that I grew up with that I'm not thrilled about how they feel about things, but they said, do you feel you're shaming your parents' memory or anything like that? And I said, no, I really don't. Like I know my relationship with my parents. And the
yeah,
reality is I'm shaming other adoptees not to bring up what adoption is. And
yeah,
and then you're part of the problem. Like if you're all rainbows and I mean, some
yeah,
people don't know. I mean, I was in the fog, so you don't know. But once you know, I kind of feel like you have a responsibility to we're all together. Like this is a group of us. And some
yeah,
people don't have, they're at the lower part of that and they can't talk about it and they can't write
yeah,
about it and
right.
painful.
I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, that's the other side of the coin of how well adoption has been marketed as just a beautiful thing
Hmm.
Hmm.
is the intense need for people to defend the adoptive parents
Yeah.
is
Because
just
that's the only story that's been out there forever and ever and ever.
right. So it's the credible one. And how do they
Hmm.
feel? I mean, I got that so much when people didn't even really know what my book, it hadn't been published yet. But they're like, how do your parents feel that you're doing this? That was like the first question always asked.
Right.
Yeah.
But how do you feel actually?
I
Right.
found a good shortcut, which is I just say, imagine this. You're born, you're immediately taken from your mother, and you're placed into a random family of DNA strangers. How would you feel? That's my shortcut for anybody who, because then they do stop and think about it. And
They do. It pauses. People pause
hmm
then. Hmm.
oh, I had a question about Deborah. Um, y- in one of your final chapters, you talked about that how you used characters,
Hmm.
to get her to open up and wow, she really it was like a floodgate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Has that how's your relationship now? It's been a few years.
Yeah. Oh, it's good. It's fun. We text and call each other. You know, living across the country is the biggest barrier and
Yeah.
hurdle. So, like my parents have seen her more than I do because my parents they're retired and they take road
Probably.
trips and so they can stop by and see her and I cannot. Um, but it is great relationship and that many years of repression and secrecy, even though she was able to share quite a bit with me through thinking about her life as not her own, basically, it's still pretty deep down,
Mm.
buried down there. And I don't know that that is ever going to go away. I think she needed intervention right after I was born of someone to help her understand what happened. And of course she would need that, right? In order to
Yeah.
have the kind of healthy, full gamut of the relationship that I wish we could have. It's it's limited, but loving at the same. I say loving, I think a better word might be like desired. We both really desire to be in each other's lives. And there's definitely a block of how far we can go in talking about my life and how it turned out and her not not such a decision.
Mhm. Yeah. It's intentional. You have an intentional relationship.
Yeah.
When in your book, it's obviously about transracial adoption, which was good for us because, we're not.
Mhm.
So we had our own set of challenges. What would you say, you know, to listeners who are on our podcast, who don't know a lot about this, what would you say to them about what is the difference? Like, what should they know and how can they support and talk to other adoptees or even people? We have listeners who aren't adoptees. What can they know to further educate? Because I think each person educates somebody, right? And it keeps going.
One of the biggest things I think with transracial adoption is the real desire for whiteness to be centered.
Mm,
Typically, we are living in predominantly white communities. And so the colorblind aspect, it's still prevalent where people will just say, like, I just see you. They might not say, I don't see race or I don't see color. Like, that's a little more 80s and 90s, but people still do say, like, I don't even think of you as adopted. And really what they're saying is like, you've assimilated so well into our culture of whiteness. You fit in here so well. And that's an uncomfortable place to be. And it's where so many transracial adoptees, when they reach like college age or they're out of their parents' homes, when they finally reckon with their racial identity, it it's it doesn't happen until then for so many, and that's pretty tragic.
yeah. Yeah.
Have you come across any white parents that are doing it right? That, because I mean, in the book, I didn't see any that were doing it right, and it
We
was it
cringed
was
a lot.
so I know the one that really sticks out in my mind are I think they lived in Vale or
Oh,
Colorado.
someplace, yeah,
Vale.
and just but in like a ski town where I mean, clearly there wouldn't be any people of color in the school, and then they were justifying it, and it was about them. And I'm just wondering, have you come across any that have done it right?
Yeah, I have a great partnership with the Adoption Support Center of Indianapolis where
Mm.
they have me talk and do a consulting session with prospective adopters, specifically white people who are open to adopting Black or brown kids. And this agency will put people on hold until they make changes in their lives. And so when I've consulted with some folks, they've decided to move to like sell their house, move to another community for the sake of diversity. And it's really awesome. Some people have done that even if they don't end up adopting a child of color, which I love that even more
Yeah.
because it's like a genuine desire to diversify their lives. So I have seen people not balk at suggestions like moving or go to the local school and get the demographics, not just of the students, but of the teachers and the principals. And people have leaned in to understand why that's important, um, as well as ensuring that it's not just you putting people of color in your child's life, but it's yours too. So think about
Mhm.
who's coming in and out of your house for dinner parties. Are they only white people? Because that needs to change. And so, how do you make friends when you're adults? People, that's always hard no matter what, but
Yeah.
especially with this lens. But yeah, I think there is a growing faction of people who are understanding how we're not fully raising a transracial adoptee if we're omitting that whole aspect.
Hmm.
So I'm really glad about that.
Um, th- there for every baby born now, the statistic is that there's 45 couples wanting to adopt.
Hmm.
And to me, that it just puts a real sour taste in my mouth about adoption. Like I needed
Yes.
another reason to have a sour taste in my mouth.
Yes,
But
especially because we have 400,000 kids that are ready to be adopted. So yeah,
yes,
the fact that
or
people want the baby, the
They
clean
want the
slate,
baby.
yeah, that is cringy. Hmm.
yes. Are you the people you work with, like say in Indiana or whatever, the adoption, are they wanting babies or are they open to older children? Is it yes, they want the babies, right?
They want the babies, but I feel, not working within that organization. I'm a consultant, so I ask questions like, I'm not gonna let you get off the hook, and this feels good to me. So I'm asking, like, if you're really, really want to be a parent, why do you want to wait so long for a newborn? And people are able to get real and finally say, it does usually skirt along the lines of the blank slate, even if they know the
Right.
theory isn't
That's it.
correct. They know that's not how it works, but there is still a desire, people will say, to start from the beginning. I'm using air quotes for people listening because it's it's a weird position for me to be in. I was adopted from foster care, and there was no interest in adopting me, which is why I got sent across the
Yeah.
country. And so to try to consult with people who, looking at them,
Yeah.
I'm like, you would never have wanted me. It's tricky.
Yeah, you said that in the book for one of the like having to be, you wouldn't want me, but I'm sitting here trying to help you. It's a very strange, everybody wants the puppy and not the dog, right? And it's like, I mean, that's a sad reality. I think actually people do adopt dogs more than they do,
I, I
the
I
puppies.
do think I think that you know how like if you're in a bad relationship and you keep making excuse like I'll change that I'll be the one to
Ah,
change up, and I think there's an element of that with the blank slate. Okay, yes, I know that's not, but
but
will be
I can do it.
different.
This is
Yeah.
different. Yes. My dear friend Jae Kim, who is a Korean adoptee, she read this term that I love. Can't remember who wrote this, but it's called terminal uniqueness. And I use that a lot
Mm.
because I will
Uh,
teach about adoption, openness, or a race class or something like that. And there's always many people who will come up to me and say, like, thank you so much for sharing about maybe it's openness, like how to start creating a relationship with the kid's birth parents. But they'll say, but we can't do that because our case is so different and
Uh-huh.
our kids' biological parents are different for this reason or that reason. And it's that piece. For some reason, everybody is exempt.
Hmm.
It's
We had
hard,
a
yeah, go ahead. Go
oh,
ahead.
well, we had a message
Oh,
on
yeah.
Facebook recently from a adoptive father, and he's like, I just found your podcast, and I'm curious, what do you feel about adoption? Do you think it's okay? And I was honest with him. I said, not really. I don't. I think there, maybe kinship adoption, guardianship. I think there are many other answers than, erasing someone's entire identity and taking them away.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so,
yeah.
and he's like, well, we're in touch with the birth parents. I'm like, and that's the ball's in your court because there are no laws protecting the birth
Right.
parents or the child. And so until that changes, so
It's so loosey goosey. Like they don't have to be. And often they're not, right? And it gets uncomfortable.
I
And it's,
admire your composure, Angela, that you're able to do this.
yeah,
Um, you're I guess you're looking at the greater good without
yeah,
getting, it's hard to not get your emotions in there, isn't it?
I think it's the fact that the droves of people wanting to adopt unborn children who likely don't actually need to be adopted. Their
Mm-hmm.
biological
hmm
parents just need more resources usually.
that's exactly
I
right.
know that that fire hose of individuals is not slowing down.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so if they're inevitably going to be an adoptee, then I hope to stem the tide before the child gets into the home. So I think it's still a little bit, Sarah, what you said of like rationalizing and making it
Yeah.
okay. Um, and I'm grateful that there are so many people who are trying to work to prevent this. And this agency, the Adoption Support Center, they do a lot of good work with women who are pregnant and unsure. And so there is like an ethical line that I'm okay with consulting with them versus other
Mhm.
agencies. I'd say I just can't. And also that they've given me so much power to basically say like this couple cannot. And I wrote about this recently on my Substack. Well, it was titled like what it feels like to say no to white parents
Mm.
who want a black baby because that was a case through that agency where I got to consult with them and then I told the agency no. And they said to the family, no.
That's impressive. Yeah.
What was the defining moment?
There were a lot of pieces, but this family, they just wanted a baby to mold and shape and raise. And so there was a
Mhm.
lot of arguing with me about my lived experience and thinking that it was just one-off. Um, and they weren't willing to make any changes in their lives. So it was so clear to me, like I want to use the words neglect, like you already are saying that you will neglect your child
Mhm.
for their need for identity formation.
And that group will go elsewhere. Those parents will go elsewhere
They'll
then.
go elsewhere. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the
Hmm.
other piece is, yeah, they're just going to find another agency to do
Yeah.
it. So, yeah.
And I think that is it does run across party lines, right? Like everybody in legislature, it's pretty much this great thing, right? So
Yes,
people
they
don't
always say it's like the bipartisan,
the bipartisan.
Hmm.
everybody's happy about adoption, and judges too are
Yeah,
so quick to say,
Well,
everybody.
this is the best day of my week. I'm so glad when I get to do adoptions. Yeah.
And they don't know any better. And I think the narrative needs to shift with the work you're doing to keep yourself together and to do that because if we could replicate you all over the country, this may change. We had a couple write us that were looking to adopt and they listened to the podcast and they ended up fostering with a group that has how was it like 98%.
they found it. She said after listening to the podcast,
Mm-hmm.
she could no longer, in good conscience,
Mm-hmm.
adopt. So they signed up with a foster agency that has a 90%
Yeah.
uh, rate.
Reunification rate.
Yeah.
Yes,
Beautiful.
yes. Yeah,
Beautiful.
I mean that we made a change. I mean, that was
Yeah.
clear
That's so
cut
great.
evidence
Yeah,
of
I
making
tried
a
to
change.
write in my book about the concept of ownership and how many
Hmm.
adoptive parents you just want to own a child versus what you've said is I want to be a parent. If you want to be a parent, foster care, you
Yes.
not only can help to parent someone else's child, but there's oftentimes opportunities to help reparent a biological parent as well. There's lots of room for if that's the truth, if that's what you're really wanting,
Yeah.
fostering is absolutely the way. But that's part of, I think, my work in consulting is imploring people to be honest.
Mhm.
You know, you really maybe don't want to just parent. You
Hmm.
want what you couldn't have. You know, so often
Yeah.
infertility does come onto that story, and I think that's another reason why I'm able to, write a book and do so much of this work is that wasn't part of my experience at all. You know, I talk about my dad who chose to get a vasectomy, and my parents who um, kind of were hippies and believed that we were outpacing our resources with the rate of procreation. And so having not had the experience of the infertility being the reason why I was adopted, I think that gives me some space to help people see you really are trying to replace what you can't have, and that's
Hmm.
never going to work.
And then also there's not, uh, there's there isn't necessarily counsel, like you go through this infertility grief and then not really dealing with that grief, right? And just
Yeah.
immediately pivoting towards, okay, well, we're going to go this way. So there's no mourning often. So then there's even higher expectations placed on this poor child who's already carrying all these burdens, the burdens of the person that gave birth to them, the burdens of these adoptive parents who had fertility issues. There's
Yes.
so much in this.
Yeah, and I don't know if burden is the right word, but society's expectation that we
Yes.
turn out well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Everyone likes the great adoptee story, right?
Gotta
I mean,
have
the
this the rags to
Olympics and
riches.
And
Yes.
then if you don't turn out well, like say hit puberty and you start acting out, then it's like, well, okay,
Right.
you're adopted, you know?
Yeah.
It's
Right.
it's because your birth family.
Yes.
Yeah. There
This
was
now we're
something
back
wrong.
to nature. Yeah.
Mhm. It was nurture up until then.
Yes.
And people really think there's all these kids to adopt though, because I had a conversation with someone recently and they said, what will happen to all the babies that need to be adoption if we get adopted, that we get rid of adoption? There's so many. And I said, no, there's not. That's the
There's not a
problem.
stockpile. I remember when I worked at an adoption agency and someone came in from off the street, and I was so young I was right out of undergrad, and they did wonder, like, where do you keep the babies? Are they here? Can we see them?
Can we
Like,
see them?
wow, no, there are pregnant women who are out there struggling and
Yes.
they will have a child, but yeah, this willful denial or willful ignorance to
Mm-hmm.
see the reality is fascinatingly troublesome.
Yeah,
I agree.
I do
And
too.
for me, it's enraging that, we are in a yes, I'm still there. There's so much information out there. There's books,
Yes.
Everything.
it's willful. It is absolutely willful.
Yeah.
It's selfish.
Yeah.
There's no question there. It's just me pontificating about it.
There's a lot of information out there now, which is so
There
awesome.
is.
But then
That's
yes, it
what's
is
great.
enraging when people are like, there's nothing out there. We don't know. It's like,
Yeah.
actually, there is. You've chosen not to know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So much out there.
Yes, to get your blank slate,
Yeah.
you have to ignore all the information to keep that blank slate narrative.
Well,
Oh,
and I think the work you're doing actually just helping adoptees now, because I like that you're helping younger, starting at 12.
Yeah,
And
it's
that's
pretty
got
awesome.
that's pretty awesome, because if people can have their agency or whatever about themselves younger,
It's
because
amazing. I mean,
yes.
had a mentor session with a 13-year-old last week who said, I want to be an adoptive parent when I grow up. And I was able to have a great session with her to ask, why? And let's think through this. And without having another adopted person like break down that, she would definitely go through the world with everybody just saying, awesome, yes, you're going to give back and do what was done to you.
Right.
That's so great. But instead, we talked about, like, well, let's think about these women who are pregnant. They want to keep their children,
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
and so there's a 13-year-old who is starting to have that go down that train of thought. And I think, and when we ended, she was just like, yeah, I don't know why I said that. I guess I was just mimicking, what I saw. Of course you want to be
Yeah.
a mom because I have a mom and I want to be a dog. And I was like, yeah, this is in my brain. I'm like, I'm so happy to be able to intervene and
Oh,
offer a
Yes.
different perspective at this age. So good.
I
Early
think
intervention is
yes.
so key.
With like kindness and
Mm-hmm.
Kindness.
understanding and like rational
Yeah.
thought.
Well, and I think
Rational thought. Yeah.
think if people understand adoption starts with a loss, right? And I don't
Yeah.
know that I even understood that.
Right.
Mm-mm.
No,
And
I don't think like this 13-year-old understood until
no,
we are breaking it down. What happened to you?
to the baby, I was in a writing group last night of adoptees, and we meet every week, and we were saying, so many of us have heard our stories now or know what happened to us type of thing. Maybe not every minute, but you kind of know, piece together the puzzle. And you look at it and you go, wait, that was me? Like
Yes.
I was that baby. I was in a courtroom where someone took me from my mom. My mom was crying. That's how I started. Like, that's me. But everybody had that in the group, right? Some different version. And not just, BSCs from our baby scoop era, but younger too. And I think when you just say to people, adoption starts with loss and then go from there, maybe they can hear it differently. Kind of how Sarah says, like, have a blunt answer to start with in kindness, but then maybe that's,
Yes.
I don't know. It's still
Yes.
learning. I mean, I learned so much from your book. So I mean, we always think we know things, and I'm like, wow, every week I'm learning again. So
There's so much richness in this book. I want to go
oh,
back
me
and look
too.
at things. Like, would you talk about the Sonder sphere? That was
Yeah.
so interesting. And I mean, there's
Yeah.
so much, but that kind of stuck out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the Sondersphere was fun. It's a made-up word for folks who haven't read my book, based on this other made-up word called Sonder from this man, John Koenig, who wrote the book, The Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows. I just love that. And this is a book filled with terms that he made up that he felt like the English language doesn't have enough words to describe the unique feelings and experiences we all have. And so there was one called Sonder that I really latched onto, and it's the realization that passerbys and people around you all have worlds as vivid and complex as your own. And when I applied that to my biological mother, my biological father, things started changing because before then, so many of us just have kind of a one-track mind about who our birth families are, that they're just poor and couldn't keep us, or something really basic. And so the
Mm-hmm.
Saunders sphere helped me realize if they have lives as vivid and complex as me, then they have hobbies and interests and friends and quirks. And um, so giving more humanity to individuals like that was helpful. But then I added the word sphere to say, so often with openness and adoptions, people like adoptive parents are really in control of what that openness contact
Mhm.
looks like. And so they are choosing, like, we're not going to have openness because your birth parent smokes cigarettes. So it's not safe. Instead, the Saunders sphere, I'm trying to say, if all of our lives are as vivid and complex as our own, then why would we be exempt from that? Like, maybe adoptive parents had a fight last night because you are a normal human being, and we're not going to say that your child can't be with you right now. So let's extend grace and this sphere of individuals who are all really complex, and we need that. It takes a village to raise a child sort of
Yeah.
mindsets. So yeah, that was kind of my big theory around the next frontier of openness and adoption. Can it just be that we're all unique humans with highs and lows, ups and downs, terrible habits and lovely habits all the same?
I love
Yeah.
that.
I do
That was
too.
really jumped out at me in the book. I mean, there's so many things did, but that was really special in the way you described it. I want to
Yeah.
get that book by John
I do
Koenig.
too. I'm like,
It's so great. But yeah, it hurts me when I hear adoptive parents say things like, we have the best birth mom,
oh,
which is they're talking about their kids' biological parents, but they'll say we, and they're trying to say, like, they're just the way we want them to be. They're
yes. Oh,
compliant and all
Mhm.
these, and
that cringe. That makes
that
me
is,
cringe.
yeah, that is not a compliment.
No,
No,
They lost
no.
their
no.
child.
Yeah, that's not the best. Yeah, that's that right there when you said it, it like I inwardly had to do a
I hear
thing.
it a lot.
Ah,
Uh, I like this idea of the next frontier.
me too.
Do you, in thinking about wrapping up, I just want to know what, in your ideal scenario, would there just be no adoption? I mean,
Yeah.
there are other, yeah.
Yeah, I think we can care for others without having a
Hmm.
legal process. I absolutely think
I
that
do too.
there are humans that aren't able to to raise other humans. That will always be the case. Goodness gracious, it's hard.
Yeah.
Parenting is so hard. And living in our country, oh my word, having a home forever, like, oh my gosh, so many factors. So that's not going to change. But I absolutely don't believe we need to terminate someone's rights in order to
Right.
keep a child healthy, happy, safe, and loved. So it's
Yeah.
that neighborhood, that Saunders sphere. Let's
Mhm.
take care of each other. And
Yeah.
I wish we could do that.
Maybe
Maybe
we'll
that's your
see
next
some
book
of
title,
that. Yeah, that's the book title.
The Saunders Sphere, the next frontier.
That'd be awesome.
And
Love that.
maybe with all this work in our lifetimes, we'll see some of that. I mean, it would be the hope, right? I mean, that's why we do all this.
It's an uphill battle.
It is
Very, very steep hill to climb.
the financial battle.
Yes. Angela, thank you so much. It was so great to talk to you and really
Gosh.
wonderful to read your book. It's a treasure. I finally, I don't know if you heard, but I finally just had to use my highlighter because there was so
Oh,
much of my little
I'm into marking it too now.
I just couldn't, there's so much I needed to write and when we discuss it. So
We
I
circle
have
words and star things.
oh, I'm so honored. It's still a little bit surreal seeing other people hold the book and
It
knowing that
must
they've
be.
marked it up. I'm like, wow, it's out there.
it's
really
very
out
much
there.
out there. So
Yeah, it's
thank you
wonderful.
so much for coming on. Really
Thank
loved having
you.
you.
Thank you.
Yes, likewise. The feeling is mutual. Thank you so
Nice to
much.
meet you.
Thanks.